merge the two sessions of film and theatre and diaspora writing. Can I please request all the presenters to please come on the stage?
It'll be off the hall. Thank you, ma'am. Folks, welcome to the next session. Many of you have traveled long distances, and sometimes, depending on the number of seats on the plane and your mileage status, you get an upgrade. So I think this session has clearly been upgraded to a plenary session, and my concern is there's far fewer people. There seem to be more people on the stage than in the hall. I'm sure they'll be walking in. So just to get a sense from my colleagues, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 presenters on the stage. Is anyone else? 6, sorry. So I assume there are then 6 papers. We were expecting 10. So the organizers will investigate what happened to the 4 people and will take appropriate action. It makes sense to merge the session because it's looking at the more creative side of diaspora and film and theatre and literature. The ways in which diaspora is presented in writings. And of course, in this creative context, there's always license. We're operating in an Indian environmental context, Indian location, and certainly for those of us who are outside, like myself, then the films become one of the main connections with India, and it also can simultaneously become a disconnection. When I watch a Bollywood movie set in London or in New York or Sydney, one gets a sense that it reflects the desire of the new elite in India, a subliminal dislocation from the country itself. But so much for the introduction. So we'll have a little bit more time. I would say my colleagues should target about 12 to 15 minutes. They've given me a bell, and then there are more powerful forms of intervention that come thereafter. So I'll go in the order in which it's presented. So we got Dr. Vishwa Raksha. So she's going to protect her team, I think. And she's looking at the ways in which Hindi cinema presents the search for connecting to Indian identity. Okay, we've got 3 more people, so the timing is now definitely 12 minutes.
Thank you. Very good morning. I don't know, I should be happy or I should feel a little sad that this is a session which is merged. But overall, I think I'm happy because I thought I'll miss out on the other session which was as interesting as this was. On the outset, let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Raksha. I teach sociology in University of Jammu. Some of my friends here said, where is Jammu? So I had to actually kind of identify myself, not just with Jammu, but say Jammu and Kashmir. So people had, an expression of saying, okay, fine, now we know where Jammu is. I'm here to talk on In Search of and Connecting to Indian Identity, the popular Hindi cinema and diaspora. The changing political and economic scenario worldwide since the 1990s has necessitated changes in the articulation of Indian national identity, and this has been reflected politically by as we know, yesterday also there was a talk about it, Government of India's passing of the Dual Citizenship Act in 2003 and the consequent celebration of the days like Bharatiya Pravasi Divas every year. This has also been supported by an articulation and representation of the changed national identity by the media, particularly Hindi cinema, that has come to have worldwide appeal and viewership. The Hindi commercial cinema, the most popular cultural discourse of modern India, has entered a new phase where its meanings and representations are interrogated and forming a wider community. Hindi cinema has developed as a powerful diaspora media. Hindi cinema offers a sense of homecoming to the diasporic community and keeps them connected to their homeland through the cultural sphere of India. In India, where access to communication systems is concentrated in the cities and among the educated elites, media, particularly the larger-than-life films, occupy a special place in the social ritual of the populace and continue to function effectively as tools of hegemonization. I'm quoting here Maya Ranganathan, who argues that in the largest film-producing country in the world, films have played a role in the democratization of the culture and taken over and even eclipsed other forms of cultural productions, particularly in the realm of nationalism. While the media in general constructs and celebrates the nation, for millions of Indians wherever they live, a major part of India derives from its movies, forming a vital part of what Appadurai calls the ethnoscape. They lead to the imagination of the nation, complementing perhaps the personal experiences of the first generation of migrants and leading to new images for the second and subsequent generations of Indians whose knowledge of the nation is dependent more on secondary sources. For the second and subsequent generations of the migrants, the films also help develop their own identity. The new heights that Hindi films have reached in recent times signify the transgression of geographical and language barriers by Hindi films, and most importantly indicate Bollywood's growth into the most famous international brand, making possible a crossover to globalized mainstream cultures of the West. The economic liberalization of 90s that necessitated, among other things, drawing investments to the country from abroad, which we have all been talking in all other sessions as well, has led to a redefinition of the other. The stereotypical media image of the callous and selfish Indian abroad of the 80s, when the Indian economy appeared to be doing well, had to give way to a more tolerant image of the NRI following the waking up of the Indian government to the need involving the huge NRI population in the process of nation making. Bollywood films not only enable the diasporic community to maintain ties with their geographically distant country of origin, but these ties to the old homeland often even define the development of ethnic identity in the new homeland, which again yesterday we were talking about. Indeed, connections to place, even if only imagined, are of central importance to migrant lives. Thus, the market for Hindi films has grown beyond India to South Asia and extended diasporic community. With the Indians abroad becoming an important market of popular cinema, as well as site for its production, a spate of films began to be made on the lives of Indians abroad like Dilwale Dulhania, Pardes, Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gham, Kal Ho Na Ho, Swades, Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna, list is endless. With every threat of cultural importation, mainstream Hindi films have found different ways of exercising the onslaught by asserting their Indian identity with the latest technological or market trend. They incorporate new themes without staying too far from conservative ideology of sexual behavior or social relations in order to consolidate their national appeal, narrow the potential for controversy, and repulse foreign competition. To state it most strongly, the evocation and creation of Indianness has been a corollary to India's economic liberalization, which has frequently produced an ultra-conservative and reactionary notion of the indigenous. The films of 90s and thereafter, which I just mentioned, and one of them at the turn of the century like Swades, are shown to accommodate norms that are upheld as Indian, and this is something which is very, very important. NRIs constitute an important part of the Indian market for films today and who are appearing as a new character type in the Hindi films. On one hand, where the diasporic community is portrayed as incredibly wealthy, yet faithfully in possession of the essence of Indianness, which is equated with devotion to family, hospitality, loyalty to friends, modesty and extreme wealth, and an adherence to the rules of patriarchy and monogamy. The most successful genre to deploy the new cinematic style is the family melodrama, which was the most popular genre of the 90s. Instead of featuring India's underclasses, as did earlier generations of the films, the 90s melodrama centers on wealthy Indian families with traditional values. These big-budget films, often shot on location in Europe and the US, present endless rounds of parties, beach dances, wedding celebrations, festive occasions, and an all-round feeling of well-being. Films such as Hum Aapke Hain Kaun, Dilwale Dulhania, and all other such, the names that I've already taken, allow their audiences to share in the extravagant lifestyles of the elite classes and cross the threshold of their luxurious homes, whether Western-style mansions or traditional havelis. The conflict staged in these films is between tradition and modernity. The 90s family melodrama endorses traditional values through its staging of elaborate Northern Indian marriage ceremonies and by making the joint family into the locus of the nation at the moment in time when the nuclear family is replacing the extended among India's middle class. films like Dilwale Dulhaniya and Pardes use the marriage between an Indian and an NRI as an occasion for exploring the contradictions of the new global Indian, which includes diasporic community as a very important part of it. These films perfected the style of Western gloss, Desi soul. I also look at, I'll skip this part, that how women are especially heroines, serve as iconic function in representing family values. I mean, how they are used as agents. I'm skipping this part, but coming back to how historically the moral universe of commercial Indian cinema is a world in which social duties, love of nation, and kinship bonds outweigh individualism and personal desire. It's important to look at. The 90s family melodrama broke with this convention by giving value to the acquisition of new wealth and the pursuit of personal desires. Its moral universe is maintained, however, through the symbolic functioning of the heroine as it defines the boundaries of Indianness. Dilwale Dulhaniya, which broke all records in India and across the countries, is considered a watershed film in Hindi cinema's depiction of NRIs as much as its leading characters are British-born Indians. The message of Dilwale Dulhaniya is that although the hero and heroine both are NRIs, wear Western clothes and embrace youth culture, they have maintained their Indian values, particularly around questions of sexual morality. I have illustrations to prove this, but I'll skip that part. I'll come to Patricia Obroy's argument where she puts it that in films like Dilwale Dulhaniya, contemporary Indian identity is constructed not in antithesis to, but rather through the romantic engagement, emotional travails and psychological conflicts of protagonists who are both NRIs. The challenge of being, and more important, remaining Indian in a globalized world is one that must be met equally by those who live abroad. Second, whether at home or abroad, it is the Indian family system that is recognized as the social institution which is essential to define being Indian. It is an institution that is now projected as portable, can be carried, it can be infirm, or so it is fervently hoped, even when all else changes. Indian family values are proposed as the crucial markers of Indianness. Obroy further argues that the assertion and endorsement of Indian family values in an uncertain, globalizing world has become a conspicuous and insistent theme in popular culture in 90s, and where films like DDLJ propose that Indian identity can survive translocation. Oh, I've finished my 10 minutes. Thank you. I thought I timed myself, in any case. Members of the diaspora have increasingly formed an important part of the primary target audience for the Indian popular industry, and that's one of the reasons why Indian films are now targeting more the diaspora. I was looking at a lot of other films, but I think I'll skip most of it, and I'll come to one of the important films, which is SOEDS, which actually talks of what we were talking since yesterday, the return migration. And SOEDS becomes a significant film in this context, as the protagonist of the film is an Indian settled in the US, returning to India not to find a bride or celebrate his marriage in the Indian way, but with a clear intention of contributing to the development of the nation. I don't know how many among the audience has seen the film, but if one finds the time, I mean, it's worth one watch. The film is about Indian national identity. Mohan Bhargav, the protagonist, is torn between his desire for the orderliness and the prosperity of the Western world and the cultural superiority of the land he belongs to. Also, it falls in line with what Chatterjee identified as a unique feature of anti-colonial resistance, the creation of an inner, culturally sovereign realm while competing with the West in the outer realm of politics and economy. Thus, the parameters of development identified in the film as desirable are Western. However, the way in which it is to be reached is through Indianness. I mean, you have a lot of scenes where they show haldi and other things depicting India. Even the title of the film is very interesting, where you have two titles, SOEDS, we the people. In most Indian languages, there's a clear distinction between Desh, which is homeland, and Videsh, which is foreign land. SOEDS is an extension of the word Desh, which means our own land. To Mohan, an Indian-born American who left India 12 years ago, and to others like him, SOEDS can only mean India. The film deserves attention firstly for steering away from stereotypical image of Indians who migrate to the West as selfish, uncaring, and secondly for laying down the ways in which they can contribute to the nation's development. However, what is significant is that while the film may indicate a greater tolerance towards an acceptance of the Indian who has made his or her home in the West, it still roots Indianness in tradition and the established tenets of the other things like constitution. And I'll end up with the Christian Brossier's argument, where Christian Brossier is talking of homing desire. Says homing desire, which embraces both the myth of return to one's origins and the lived experiences of a locality, how Hindi films have varied notions of cultural identity, and most of the members of the first generation still aspire to return to their home country in the future, a phenomena that has been labeled as myth of return, for in most cases, the return to the land of origin is generally only temporal. So process argues that displaced and alienated at home, despite the desire for homing, this is one of the ghosts haunting many migrants, forcing them to generate both fragile and multiple images of themselves, as well as sound visions of Indianness disseminated by Bollywood or Hindi cinema. It is here that a discourse of fear takes place and narratives of crisis are elaborated on fertile grounds. Crisis of loss, lack, dismemberment, pain, etc. The experience of being foreign at home, Pardesh, invokes tensions that may arise when places that have been imagined at a distance must become lived spaces. Maybe that is one reason why Bollywood's invocation of family plays an important role to migrants, for it remains a reminder and harbour of home, even when chances for a return to the homeland decrease. Thank you so much. I've almost murdered my paper, but I hope I've kept it up.
Thank you, Raksha. I thought you captured the key points very well, and I watched all those movies and I have my views on them, and we'll talk about it later. We found our lost friends, so colleagues, please, we've got to keep it 10 minutes. I have to be ruthless, otherwise we're going to miss lunch and we'll take you straight into dinner. So in the next paper, we continue with the Bollywood theme, and Dr. Tapasi Ghosh will follow on, and she will not repeat the points made by Raksha, so we'll save time. Oh, Tapasi Ghosh is not here, okay. So we'll go on to Shilpa Nandi, and she's looking at Indian cinema and the notion of Indianness. And you'll notice, colleagues, that this is also a gender panel. I'm the odd person out here. Clearly, men secretly watch these movies and don't acknowledge it in public.
Thank you. Very good morning to all of you. Since last day, we are all hearing on diaspora, and what I felt is that as 7 colors makes the rainbow. Can you hear?
Closer.
As 7 colors makes the rainbow, here I found 7 different shades of diaspora. One is gender, one is migration, human development, finance, inclusion, exclusion of politics, diaspora writings, and here I add the 7th flavor, that is the films and theatres and cinema. Well, I have named my paper the diaspora in the Indian cinema and its notion of Indianness. Well, I will be focusing on 3 important points, that how the Indian cinema has identified, has constructed the identity of the Indians living in USA and UK. Secondly, the role the Indian filmmakers from regional to local, national and at the international level projecting the same concept of the Indianness and the Indian film industry. And third, the notion of Indianness, the people who are living far away from India, how they connect themselves and maintain a balance between the new land and the homeland. So I begin here. Cinema remains arguably the most prominent vehicle for articulating the experiences of diaspora. It is also notable that there has been a diverse range of new media that use multimedia, computers, technologies into which cinema is increasingly incorporated and through which artists are choosing to represent and debate diaspora. The notion of diaspora is quite suggestive for media study. Diaspora suggests the peculiar spatial organization of broadcast audiences, social aggregate sharing a common symbolic orientation without intimate interaction. This paper would therefore like to demonstrate on how Hindi film narratives, viewing practices and patterns of socialization in the American and UK diaspora intersect to create a discursive realm of consensus regarding the notion of Indianness. Another noteworthy aspect that the paper likes to examine is that the audiences can no longer be treated as merely markets catalyzing the globalization of the Hindi film industry or as communities seemingly starved of cultural resources, but rather as an integral part of the cultural imaginary of Hindi cinema. It means that Hindi cinema has the power to influence and shape the politics of identity of being Indians in the UK and USA. Nearly 20 million people of Indian origin live outside India, and they are diversified into innumerable of caste, subcaste, regions, religions, localities, etc. Any definition of Indianness needs to underline attributes that encompass all diversities that are present among the Indians in India and also elsewhere beyond the national boundary. I would like to quote here Mr. Tharoor, Shashi Tharoor, who in an article Classic and Contemporary points out that films represent the prime vehicle for the transmission of popular culture and values. In today's world of global movement and cultural hybridity, true identity has become a fundamental and yet a significant issue in one's life. Next, I would like to highlight that in an article mentioned by Ashish Radhaksha, he argues that the analysis of Bollywoodization historicizes the transitions in the relation between Hindi cinema, the state and audience communities, and also raises the question of how cinema has come to occupy its crucial presence as a cultural unifier and a keeper of flame for countries, individuals and families of Indian origin around the world who engage with the ecology of this new Bollywoodization Hindi cinema. Now here I would like to mention, as my dear colleague already has mentioned the names of those films like Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, Swadesh, Pardees, Tal, the directors who are behind this, they are Subhash Ghai, Karan Johar, Suraj Barjatia, and also some of the Bengali directors who have made their presence in international market like Satyajit Ray, Mrinal Sen, Adhur Gopalakrishnan, Shyam Benegal and Gautam Ghosh. They are the filmmakers who play in attracting the global audiences by making films on immigrant Indians who still keeps India in their heart. What we say in कि हम तो India को दिल में लिए घूमते हैं. This is the statement they use. Follows Indian tradition, values, customs and keep alive the notion of Indianness. Another group of thinkers whom we find who are not living in India but staying abroad, but they also have the same flame of that cultural universe what I just said, are Meera Nair, Gurinder Chadha, Deepa Mehta, who have been creating their own places. Their film aimed at global audiences which are often laced with a dilemma of second generation expatriates. There are at least a dozen of Indian filmmakers who live abroad and have yet not cut their creative amicable cord with India. Directors like Manoj Naik, Shamilan and Shekhar Kapoor have been making international films but with Indian consciousness. Last, I would like to highlight one film, that is Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, where I found the strong sense of the connection of Indianness, a family who is living abroad but tries, a family where there is a mother, where there is a son, where there is a husband, who are all trying to create their sense of identity living abroad. And that is, in this I would like to cite 2 or 3 scenes where I would be clearing you that how this sense of notion of Indianness is being created. In Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, once the narrative moves to London, the role that married women are expected to play in an expatriate context is also rendered in no uncertain terms. In London, the actress of the film Kajol is clearly responsible for maintaining an Indian home, including ensuring that the son is well schooled in Indian traditions. She quotes in a scene that turning to her husband she says, "He's already and half English. Don't complain to me if he becomes completely English." This is the sense which she tries to create, that being in London you can adopt the culture of the British, but at the same time she is also projecting, she is also memorizing her own tradition, own culture, own value that her son should adopt. Secondly, again, another hero of the film, Hrithik Roshan, when he arrives in London to the strains of a remixed version of Vande Mataram, a nationalist song possibly invoked to remind the viewers in the diaspora of the irrevocable links that they have with their homeland. He is greeted by a group of Bharatanatyam dancers, the prominent classical dance form that is highly popular in the diaspora. His search for his brother's contact information, and the song in the background is again Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindu Sita Hamara. So we find that it is the film rendered inextricable from the notion. It is an explicit acknowledgement both to viewers in India and the diaspora, of the diaspora's eluding desire to stay in touch with India. Same kind of feelings we find in different films already mentioned, DDLJ, Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, Pardees, etc. Lastly, I would like to conclude, in today's world of global movement and cultural diversification, true identity has been very significant issue in one's life. It has become difficult for one to maintain his own original identity, and that too in foreign country. Here we find the role Hindi cinema played is very notable in influencing the mind and heart of the people who are away from their original homeland but who will to retain, maintain and restore their culture, language, customs and tradition. Therefore, Hindi cinema has not only played a pivotal role but has also served as the most influential communication medium in constructing and maintaining the cultural identity. They seem to consider Bollywood movies as a vehicle for showcasing Indian culture and tradition. Watching these movies, the Indian Americans have associated Indian culture with family togetherness, strong sense of religion, festivities and attitudes and behavior. Perhaps they are able to identify with Bollywood movie character and remind them of their identity. Therefore, to sum up, diaspora groups play an identity game, legitimizing their imposition into two different national contexts, which help to bolster their claims of collectivized authenticity in both their new land and homeland. Coming again what I started, that it is really a diaspora where we are all here, we all having a particular identity, but apart from this, wherever we go, we try to maintain a balance with the identity of their country, their custom, their traditions also. So, thank you.